year 2021 proved to be a continuation of the global supply chain challenges we faced starting in 2020 due to the COVID pandemic. To get a better understanding of the state of the industry, we really need to go back to the beginning. First, what is a global supply chain? The movement of goods between countries has existed for centuries. However, starting in the 1970s, the improvement in technology and transportation methods really gave rise to opportunities to look at foreign markets for sourcing of raw materials and cost-effective labor, and that gave some economic advantages to companies. However, in order to take advantage of sourcing from foreign markets, companies really needed to develop sophisticated methods to move these materials and products from origin to where they're needed. The international transportation aspect is what's known as a company's global supply chain. As a hypothetical example, an auto parts supplier may have raw materials sourced from China. These materials are moved by ship or aircraft to Mexico, where it's made into the final product, and from there it can be sold around the world. Initially, these companies would have large warehouse facilities to receive and store their products until needed. However, as companies began to become more sophisticated, a new operational method was developed called just-in-time logistics. This was pioneered by auto manufacturer Toyota and became a sign of a robust global supply chain. Just-in-time logistics was the timing of transportation from point A to point B based upon when the product would actually be needed. This allowed companies to remain nimble, allowing them to adapt to changing market conditions while cutting costs. Carriers such as airlines and steamship lines, which moved freight from point A to point B, were well choreographed with predictable schedules and transit times. In late 2019, the world began to first learn of COVID-19 taking place in China. The initial reaction by the Chinese government was aimed at containment. Most cities in China were ordered to quarantine, and as a result, production of materials as well as movement of goods came to an abrupt halt. As China began to emerge from the quarantines, other countries began to have ever-increasing number of cases. The various world governments took measures that resulted in quarantines of their own. The impacts are many, but to name a few, there was reduction in the number of available workers at the factories, truck drivers, cancellation of passenger flights, disruption of available workers at the ocean cargo ports. Freight that normally moved by air was then bottlenecked, resulting in massive surge in demand in the small number of available freighter aircraft. Some of the freight even shifted to ocean transportation, increasing the demand in that mode as well. The carefully constructed schedules of both air and ocean carriers suddenly became very unpredictable. At the same time, as more people were forced to quarantine, those who suddenly found themselves working or taking classes from home drove up demand for home office or school equipment. In addition, outside entertainment suddenly became unavailable, resulting in people utilizing their time to improve their homes, take up hobbies, or other things. And as a result of that, there was a strong demand and surge of other products, which largely are sourced from foreign markets, further adding to the demand in an already strained global supply chain. With the world's governments each taking steps to mitigate the spread of the pandemic, each took measures that they deemed as necessary, but also added strain to the global supply chains. For example, in some countries, there were limitations not only on the free movement outside the country, but now even within that country. These sudden stops, starts, stop again across the globe led to more major disruptions of the carefully constructed schedules of both aircraft and cargo ships. And as if all of this were not enough, the incident on March 29, 2021, with one of the world's largest container ships, the Ever Given, was en route from Malaysia to the Netherlands via the Suez Canal when it became stuck, blocking this vital shortcut between Asia and Europe. As it was unknown how long it would take to get the passage open again, many ships sat idle, waiting, while some chose to divert the long route around Africa. Meanwhile, more ships were coming and a giant bottleneck grew. Once freed, the ships that went the long way were off schedule and began arriving at European ports at the same time as those who waited. This created congestion at ports with many ships arriving at the same times. This is very similar to what happened with the sudden stops and starts on the Trans-Pacific lanes. Now the world faced challenges of imbalance of equipment, such as containers and chassis, all around the world. Also, congestion-related issues where too many containers are at port, causing no place to be able to offload them. Rail yards became overwhelmed, causing inability to move to inland container yards. Of course, besides the long and unpredictable schedules of movement, came the concern of the cost. As natural, when demand outgrows available supplies, then cost increases. Those willing to pay more were given the little space available, ultimately forcing everyone to pay higher and higher rates. And of course, many industries simply cannot absorb the new normal in terms of rates, which then leads to shortages of certain commodities. In the case where these commodities are the actual raw materials for manufacturing, it then spirals into other issues. The end result is that one issue led to another, which then leads to another, and so on. It can be compared to a slow-moving train headed to a bridge that's no longer standing, where you can recognize the next potential issue, but there's very little you can do to alter the impact. The truth is that with new variants and government actions, it's impossible to predict exactly how long it's going to take to get back to normal, and what new normal might even look like. What can be said is that all of those impacted are making adjustments to the expectations, as well as getting better at their continuation of service methods. For example, a typical Trans-Pacific Ocean movement prior to the pandemic was generally around 30 to 35 days, whereas now you would need to expect 60 to 70 days, or even longer, depending on the lane pairs. In these uncertain times, you really need a strong logistics partner who's up to date on everything going on in the world and how it may impact your business, offering you potential solutions outside of the standard ones of the past. There are many companies that can move freight from point A to point B, but the true value of a logistics service partner is demonstrated in our ability to consult and help our clients with creative solutions to steer around as many of these obstacles and/or mitigate costs as much as possible. At PGL, we also work hard to keep our clients and staff updated, and not only with current situations, but those we see as potential risks to their business.
To ship your next big thing, visit shippgl.com or call 833-SHIP-PGL.